Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Blacks Only. That's right, Blacks Only here on the Big Liberty Show. Today I have a very interesting panel of individuals. Notice I said individuals there, just checking if you guys are still liberals. Kidding. Interesting panel of individuals who are Cape Townian based. And but before I get to any of that, I am in Cape Town as I'm shooting the second part of a 3-part miniseries on the taxi industry. We'll be calling that Taxiland, a 3-part miniseries as we look at the entire industry from the owners to the drivers and the associated entrepreneurs who essentially live off this industry, from the guys who wash taxis to the street vendors and the like. So we'll be bringing you an inside view of the taxi industry in a 3-part miniseries only on the Big Liberty Show. You can look forward to that in the early parts of 2020. A lot of work that goes into that one. Guys, welcome to the show. Welcome to Blacks Only. You know how the show rolls. It's the show that makes fun of society's obsession with identity, things like race and gender. You know, blacks here, whites there. That's nonsense. The real diversity that matters is intellectual diversity. That is the only diversity that really matters. Everything else is a fugazi. With that being said, let me introduce everybody to who is exactly around my table over here. I'm going to start at my farthest end with Rodney. I need to Rodney Chapman. Rodney, what's his surname?
Cameron.
There we go. I knew it was Rodney Cameron, who is, of course, a young liberal here in Cape Town, does various things. I don't really know where you are these days, but you're sort of involved still in party politics.
I am very much involved in party politics. I'm the Dear Youth Deputy Chairperson, Provincial Deputy Chairperson
Awesome.
for the Dear Youth here.
Great to have you on the show. And of course, we have another special face, a new face perhaps to the channel, one which will be a regular feature, especially when I'm down here in Cape Town. Sibs, Mr. Qetu-Yates, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Very good. Glad to have you on the show. Sibs, tell the folks who you are. What do you do?
I'm Sibs Qetu-Yates and I'm a former UCT student. I studied politics at the University of Cape Town. I was a former chairperson at the DASO branch at UCT, as well as I was an SRC member. And I'm a liberal at heart.
There you go. I'm bringing all the political heavyweights here in terms of the youth politics arena. But of course, last but not least, in a face I think you guys have seen before, and a familiar face at that, is Tariq Khan. How are you doing, Tariq?
I'm good, CC. Thanks for having me here today.
Awesome, brother, and welcome back to the show. Guys, let's hop straight into it. The first thing I wanted us to sort of perhaps laugh at, if not talk about, is Julius Malema, right? So Julius Malema is one of the newsmakers of the past week. Reason being, it seems as though the net is closing in on him, but not from the circles that we expected to be from. In other words, not from law enforcement. It seems like the media have done a greater job of exposing some of the rot and the corruption that he's alleged to be a part of. The question being, fellas, why is that the case? What's happened to our criminal justice system that the media seem to be able to compile better evidence than cops, guys? Sorry, maybe I should have said a name first.
So I would like to express my opinion.
Yeah, go ahead, yeah.
And CC, I am going to disagree with you there.
Talk
if you
to
don't
me.
mind.
Talk to me.
I think that if there is an institution that tends to fall short of certain high standards, it's actually the media. And I think you can see this in one interview where the same journalist interviewed Dan Plato, a DA politician. He then interviews an ANC politician, and then the tone he uses is very different. He subjects the DA politician to a lot more aggression.
And you're talking about Sean
Actually, I was going to bring it up. That's exactly the segue I was going to.
And because of this, I actually think that there's still a strong culture of the rule of law in South Africa. And I think there are many cases where the law has actually been used to curb Julius Malema. I speak about the hate speech case that he was involved in years ago when he was still leader of the ANC Youth League.
Shoot the book.
And there's and then there's also the gun incident where there are charges being laid against him.
But on this particular point, sorry to put a bookmark there, on that particular one though, didn't it take AfriForum threatening to do a private prosecution for then the NPA to go, oh, hang on, we're actually about to charge him. Sorry, we just lost this particular file. Oh, there it is. That's the point I was maybe trying to drive it. Again, I'm not saying it's exclusive, mutually exclusive. I'm not saying they're not, they're doing one and they're not doing the other. But it does feel like at times that it's usually the investigative journalists in this country who are doing the hard digging, which prompts law enforcement to follow. But I do take your point. Don't get me wrong. Maybe moving into Rodney just for a second, because Rodney, you actually shared that clip. Where you did the comparison between the two, and Tariq is actually spot on. Like, there was something clearly, overtly biased in how the one politician was treated versus the other. # politicians are trash, by the way. But talk to me about that. What pissed you off about that?
No, 100%. I 100% agree with what Tariq said. I was watching this video on YouTube. I saw the Dan Plater interview, and at the time, I wasn't really perturbed because I knew ENCA towards DA politicians. But immediately after that, I saw the interview for Kilian Balula, and you could see the stark contrast between the two. And then I just downloaded the video, cut out the line of questions that Shahan Ramkissoon, I think is his name, that he had to both of these interviews. And you can see the clear biases that ENCA has towards the different political parties. I don't know, you can just look at the share, who owns the shares, the stakeholders in ENCA, and you can draw your own conclusions from that.
Look, in fairness, I think there's something even deeper here. And in all fairness, I don't really care about who owns the media house or not. I think the real issue is whether there's editorial interference. But I don't want to go there. I wanted to go to the larger point we were making, I thought, which is, journalists they're not clued up. And they perform for the cameras often in a very ignorant way. For instance, how can a news anchor who's supposed to have a body of research behind him going into an interview or story basically berate the mayor of Cape Town for a function that belongs to the national government? So again, I hold no quarter for any particular politician, but fair is fair. And that interview just seemed unfair. Sibs?
No, I completely agree. I mean, it sort of goes back to the water incident, but
yes.
I mean, we often see this with the media, where sort of they have a narrative which they want to portray, and therefore, if the DA can look in this light, they'll push that narrative in this way.
Yeah.
Like, for instance, water is a national competency, but yet it was the DA's fault.
Yeah.
That was the constant narrative we saw in the media.
Maybe as a final point, I'm so clumsy today. I'm literally knocking everything out of my hand. I want to segue into a different direction because, I think this has serious consequences for voter knowledge and voters being able to be well informed, because that's what the role of the news really is, right? It's to actually inform voters around what's happening around them. And if you have an ignorant journalist, and by the way, it's not just Shahan, you'll find many cases where, in most cases, various political parties have to write a rebuttal that literally just lays out fact first before they actually go into defending their own parties. The DA is not the only party, by the way. I mean, I've seen the ANC have to write back and say, actually, you got this wrong. Fellas, I want to orientate the conversation back to Julius, because I think he's the one to watch in the news cycle going forward. It does seem as though there are machinations coming together that are now sort of closing a ring around him. Why is it important for us? And again, I say us as in those who are liberty-loving and not necessarily people in party politics. I mean, please take that cap off for the purpose of this conversation. But for those of us who are online and who fight the cause of liberty and freedom and viewing issues through that lens, why is it important for us to be able to be critical of politicians like Julius, call out the hypocrisy, but also burst this myth, this leftist cult that sort of follows politicians like Julius? Because I mean, I don't know if you guys have experienced it yourselves, but the moment you say anything critical about any leftist politician, there is this, gaggle of, social media accounts, often anonymous, who sort of defend the big man politician and not necessarily policy. Guys, have you experienced that?
Yeah, I mean, shortly after our election, I think the amount of abuse we'd get from like the EFF calling us Uncle Toms.
Yes, I love that. These are my personal favorites. House nigger, Uncle Tom, bootlicker.
It's kind of
House
boring
Negro.
now, to be honest. It's quite boring now, to be honest. Like, they just need to sort of reinvent themselves a little bit.
Yeah, but I also think that Julius is a master politician, man. And I think we must give him that due. And I think he's very smart in how he deals with criticism that comes towards him. I look at the past debate that they had in the National Assembly where they were debating the legacy of Robert Mugabe. And you had a DA MP getting up there, and he criticized Julius in a way. And his response, he didn't really respond to the criticism, but he diverts the whole attention from that argument to Khalid Kachalia's age and telling him, I've done more in the body of politics in this country. And he doesn't really deal with the argument per se. So bringing it back to Julius, he knows how to manipulate the media, draw the attention away from the core issue, which at the moment is corruption, and draw it back to race. So we need to understand that if we are going to tackle that properly as liberals,
If I can also contribute to this point, right? So if you look at what the EFF has done in the last few years, right, assaulting journalists, being involved in certain scandals like the VBSIs, I want to ask other South Africans, right, if we cannot trust the EFF with the power that it has as an opposition party, surely we also won't be able to trust it if it ever becomes the national government.
That's a good question.
And I think that this really is the reason why we need to promote awareness about the behaviors of sleek politicians like Julius Malema. And I also think it's so important for us to keep him accountable as well, so that this idea that you cannot attack him is shattered. Because if we don't do it, then that just perpetuates this whole cult of the personality. And that's the problem with many other democracies in Africa. People don't focus on ideas, they focus on certain personalities and believe that specific personality absolves people from responsibility.
Would you guys agree that there's been sort of a fear around Julius Malema? I mean, we saw the footage that came around when after Winnie Mandela's funeral, he literally assaulted a police officer on camera. And yet, nothing has been done about that.
And again, I hate to say this because it will sound like I'm propping up AfriForum, but it took AfriForum literally saying, we're going to prosecute this privately, for the NPF to then say, oh, actually, this case is also on the books and we're about to prosecute him and blah, blah, blah.
But even to that, like, even on the day, there were several police officers around him, and yet nothing happened. And I still really wonder why that is not the case. Why that is the case? Is it the fear that the EFF is going to mobilize and suddenly they'll be at your police station burning down things, or what is it? I mean, maybe I'm being a bit too dramatic in that.
No, I think you're not.
I don't actually think that you've been too dramatic, because look at how the EFF trashed H&M. And I mean, also on this whole topic of being scared of Julius Malema, right? I think it was Gareth van Onselen who wrote a report about how much changes were introduced to the EFF's parliamentary caucus, where MPs were fired quite often.
And they have a high turnover rate.
And they say that it's usually the MPs who tend to gravitate towards more free thinking who actually get fired, So I think that what he's doing is he's inculcating a culture of fear around him,
100%.
But it's funny you guys mention this, because I've been watching the EFF social media feed, and of course they're all abuzz at the moment about their upcoming elective conference. But there have been voices already saying it's an almost foregone conclusion, like he's stacked the cards in a way in which essentially he guarantees himself regaining the presidency of the party. Not regaining, because there's never an elected conference to begin with, but rather, being elected the president of the party, or the CIC of the party. And there was obviously a lot of reportage earlier on last month around how certain individuals who were seen to be critical of him or seen to be lazy in the party were being pushed aside. The likes of their current chairperson is one, Dali Mpofu. Godric Gadi is also facing apparently the axe. And who's their treasurer? That wonderfully beautiful woman. Matthys is potentially facing the axe. This is textbook Julius, isn't it? I mean, we saw the same thing when he was ANC Youth League president. But I want to come back to the real hook of what I wanted us to chat about. And Julius is just a convenient idiot in this regard. It's the cult of leftists around here, right?
Yeah.
We saw this with Jacob Zuma when he was ascending to the throne. We heard things like, oh, he's pro-poor and he understands the plight of the working class, and he's a union man through and through, according to Zolini Nzimavabi, and they later distanced themselves, of course, from any of these pronouncements, including Irvin Jim, who were like, oh, this guy is wonderful, he'll be great for the poor. At no point did anybody or was anybody able to articulate a clear policy agenda that came with Jacob Zuma? But the cult of the personality, as Tariq was mentioning, was prevalent. I'm going to be a little scathing and come after you guys a little bit and paint the same picture about Musi Maimane. To a large extent, when he was on the ascendancy, we didn't really know who this guy is. And I say this as someone who used to be in the DA, but of course it was wonderful at the time. Oh, black leader in the party, we need this. Essentially, we resorted to identity and personalities in our politics, don't we? Why is this a problem, guys? How has this come to bite us both at a societal level? And for those of you in the DA, how did it come and bite you guys?
I think emphasizing personality and identity tends to mislead constituencies, because it gets them to think that progress comes from a person who looks a certain way or who speaks a certain way. And that's not the case. Progress comes through people implementing certain policies, and policies unfortunately do not have a particular color or identity.
I agree with what Tariq's saying, and I think a lot of this I can put it at the fault of liberals, just controversially so, because I think for too often we have ceded the moral high ground to someone who plays identity politics and speaks about being pro-poor. I think we've been very quiet on our laurels for the past few years. It's only recently now that we've seen the swell of liberal thinking people getting a platform on your show and many others, Renegade Report. And I think we need to encourage this culture of people of purporting liberal ideas into society as often as possible to prevent these people from, or identity-loving people to get the moral high ground. So I think we need to take responsibility as well.
Sibs.
Yeah. I mean, just to add, I think they've both captured what I would say quite well. But what I wanted to say is it's really refreshing to see where the DA is heading now with John Steers, and you're seeing a lot more liberal ideas coming past, and he's unapologetically liberal.
Oh, is he? I mean, he just it was a big headline.
I'm not a classical liberal.
I'm not a classical liberal, and I was like, okay, like, why did he feel the need to give them that soundbite? But maybe as you're sharing your view, like, why do you think he had to do that if he didn't?
Well, that's an interesting one. I'm not too clued up on that.
Again, I'm not saying you have to talk on his behalf. I'm just like it seems weird to me, and I'm gonna put a little pressure on you guys, but it seems weird to me as someone who's now firmly outside of party politics and firmly outside of formal politics in a sense, that certain politicians who operate within a party that purports to be something would deny being that thing. It would be akin to a Cyril Ramaphosa standing up as the ANC president and saying, actually, no, I'm not really much of a socialist or even a democratic socialist. I'm more of a sort of free marketeer. I kind of dabble in the world of anarchy where there should be no government at the head of state. It's not weird to hear a person ebbed in something deny being a part of that. All right, Sibs, how do we find you? And your last word?
You can find me on Twitter at GiveQI. I'm very active on there. And my last comment would be, I have a lot of faith in where the DA is headed at the moment. I think the introduction of Gwen back into the party is a really good step. And I also think John Steers is the right person to be leading the party at this time.
There you go, Gwen. That's also maybe a extended invite for you to come onto the show, please.
Blacks only.
Bloody hell. How about also some of you ESF and ANC people, come onto the show. Stop being such chickens who hide behind, fake accounts. Tariq, how do the folks reach you?
They can reach me on Facebook via Tariq. They can even just drop me a message there and I will respond, because I am very active on Facebook. I'm not very active on Twitter, unfortunately. So you can also get to me on Instagram.
That's where elections are won.
Amen.
You can contact me on Instagram at Tariq in real life.
Awesome, got it. Guys, thank you very much for joining me on another episode of Blacks Only. And thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed that show. I brought you a particularly Cape Town flavor of it. I'm sorry it didn't have, the Gatsby on the table. In any event, it wouldn't have been kosher for me. So anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching this episode of Blacks Only. Remember, you can support the work that I do as I gallivant around the country, talking to you on the streets of major cities mostly. Hopefully I'll get to smaller cities or smaller towns too. But you can support the work that I do here by becoming a friend of the IRR. That is our crowdfunding campaign, how we fund everything that we do. How do you do that, you're wondering? Hey, SMS your name to 32823, and SMS will cost you R1. Terms and conditions do apply. Or hey, if you're tech savvy because you're part of the young and hip ones, well then find us online at www.irr.org.za/join. And remember, never trust a commie.